thing I unfortunately have to say before any political speech is that we just need to maintain a healthy environment. We need to have respect for our speakers. Any inappropriate questions or behavior will not be tolerated, and you'll be asked to leave immediately. Just a quick plug for tomorrow. As seen on Fox News with Tucker Carlson, Rachel Wilson will be joining us downstairs in Jonas 102, Jonas 102. She's going to be joining us via Zoom at 5 o'clock. She's going to be talking about failures of modern feminism. She's going to be talking about how abortion fails women and how homeschooling is important today than it has ever been. So without further ado today, though, Matthew Monfore and Julie Frye-Mueller, you guys both have 20 minutes or however long you want, just up to 20 minutes speech, and then followed by a Q&A at the end.
I'm getting a timer going. Can you hear me okay? Sounds like okay. Just get the 20-minute timer going. Thank you for having me. Does somebody want to come up here and push the buttons for the PowerPoint? That way I can stand and look at you. It's okay. Unless you have a clicker.
I'm not on me.
Okay.
Well, I'm not quite sure how this will work, because I don't know what to turn it
Oh,
on.
I'll ask you too.
Okay.
That's okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Blackhill State Young Republicans, or Republicans, not necessarily young. Nice to meet you. I'm Matthew Monfore. I was born and raised in Hot Springs, South Dakota, and graduated from high school in Pure, South Dakota. My dad is here today, and I've helped take care of him. He has Parkinson's disease. And after high school, I worked in construction, and then I went to a small Bible school. I actually turned down, right after high school, a full-ride scholarship to the top Christian university in the world, and I thought it was more important to take care of my dad. I come from a line of medical doctors. Uncles are medical doctors. My mom is a nurse. My grandma escaped Nazi Germany when she was 10 years old, and that's on my mom's side. My grandpa was a Democrat senator, and I do not hold those beliefs. And so then I went to Bible school for a few years, and then I served as a Christian missionary with the Dakota Indians, and you can find out more about me on jesuskingmission.com. And I've heard about politics and learned and thought it was important to be involved, probably from a young age. And then when COVID hit, I was actually just kind of minding my own business and working on writing a couple books. And then we were being told, what to do, and it became very excessive. And also this globalist movement became apparent. So I'm going to make a contrast for you today between globalism and then what it means to be a Republican. And so the Republican Party in South Dakota, and even at the national level, is governed by what's called a platform. And that outlines your values and for the platform and what you're going to adhere to. Some of it can be just repetitive from the Constitution. Other of them can be the main talking points and hot button issues. So I wanted to get a feel of the room, if you will. How many of you were aware that there's a Republican Party platform for your state? You can raise your hand. Okay, that's good. How many of you have looked at it? I'm asking if you've read the whole thing, but how many of you have actually looked at it? Appreciate that, and I have read it, and so, of course, being a candidate for District 30, I thought it was important not only just to go to the legislature and be an activist, but also, if I'm telling everybody what to do and I have the ability to be involved, many of you have heard about the Man in the Arena speech or poem. How many of you have heard of the Man in the Arena? A few people over there. I challenge you to go look it up. Basically, it just says, it's not fair to criticize everybody when you're not in the game. It's really easy to criticize our legislators, and governor, and representatives, etc. And the way that America was designed was that we would be involved and become the air that we breathe. And so it should be natural to us. A lot of people talk about being called by God, or, I would say the inverse of that is a lot of people are in it for business reasons. But really, it should just become natural to all of us to be involved. That's what America was built around. So go ahead to the next slide. So you have the contrast with the Republican Party, which stands for limited government and the rights of the people. And then what we're seeing today is a move of globalism. And we see that in the healthcare industry, the business industry, with ESG. How many of you are familiar with ESG and that term? So environment, social, and governance. So basically, this idea that we are going to combine a climate agenda and government and then corporations, which is called corporatism, and we're talking big corporations, to basically control the economy. And so these are some of our leaders in South Dakota, conservative leaders, Senator John Thune, Governor Dugard, et cetera. This is one example. Probably the main group that we know of, called the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. Next slide, please. About 15 minutes. So having looked at the platform and being educated by groups like South Dakota Citizens for Liberty, et cetera, which you have the scorecards on your sheet, you'll notice that only about 20% of 105 legislators, so just for those of you that may know, there's 35 districts in South Dakota, and that means there's one senator for each district, means you have 35 senators, and then you get 2 representatives for each district, which makes 70 in the House of Representatives. And you'll notice by looking at that scorecard is that there are, there's only 20% that are able to score basically a winning score of 80% or more. And you'll find that we have a lot of Republicans, though, in our legislature. Next slide, please. So this is my platform, my personal platform, and I would add a few things. But the motto is the state motto, under God, the people rule. So I come at this from a Christian worldview. I do believe that the United States of America was founded on Christian principles. I believe that South Dakota was founded on Christian principles. And the 10 Commandments are posted at the Supreme Court and several other places at DC. And so the person that actually chaired the committee that gave us our state constitution in 1889, and South Dakota became a state, was Dr. Joseph Ward, and he founded the first college in Dakota Territory. He was a Puritan pastor. He grew up in a community in New York where everything revolved around God, and the Christian God specifically. The founders of America did view other religions like Buddhism and Mohammedanism, which they called Islam. They did view them as barbaric. Basically, you could point to these places around the world, and even today, you could point to them today, and the backwards nature of it, whether you had cultic priestesses that were temple prostitutes in India, or in Islam, where you did have a lot of raping and pillaging. And I know that that can be said for so-called Christian groups throughout history, but I would challenge whether or not they were Christian and not maybe some Visigothic religion. So I believe that, number one, we need to stop medical fraud in big pharma, and I'll share with you why I believe that. I've worked with the top doctors in the world. I've worked as a journalist as well and a reporter, and have used those skills. And I do believe that the vaccine, the COVID vaccine at large, is harming people. We need to get rid of election machines. These election machines are made with foreign parts by countries that hate us. They're not auditable, and even though certain elected officials have said that they're not connected to the internet, usually when we take people to court, we find that they in fact are, have a SIM card, like a Verizon SIM card, etc. So one, we can't have people dying and getting injured. Two, you don't have a country or a constitutional Republican democracy. I used all those words together, just for those of you stalwarts here. And otherwise you have a country. And three, we need to protect children from pornography. And I have a quote here from an Oxford scholar in regards to the sexual degeneracy of a country. I'm just going to pull this up. In his 1934 book, Sex and Culture, Oxford anthropologist J.D. Unwin explained that after studying 86 civilizations over 5,000 years, including Sumerians, he's going to cover basically the whole globe, Sumerians, Babylonians, Greeks, Romans, Teutons, and Anglo-Saxons, that sexual promiscuity always precedes the decline of a civilization. And of course, our Republican platform in Section 4 deals with abstinence. And that would be, of course, on the very conservative side of that. But we need to protect children from porn. I was one of the organizers and helped promote a bill that would basically ban pornography for people under 18 online. And that passed in Louisiana and other states. And basically Pornhub left certain states. But I think that what that is doing to young kids' minds, that they, you can't have a society because young people are viewing the opposite sex as nothing other than sex objects. And you can't build families, you can't build culture or society, a healthy society, based on that. I mean, sex is a powerful weapon. Look at Troy. They started a whole war over it, right? As you study history. We need to protect property rights. We should not have I believe that just, the climate change agenda is a scam. It's not about climate change as much as it is about control. I do think that we need to be responsible, and I do think that you can use alternative energy, wind and solar for certain things, but I do not think that you can power society today using those. We need to promote true FOIA and transparency laws. Basically, if there's communications between government and people's lives are not at risk, we should have access to those. South Dakota has what's called I think it's called like a sunlight or sunrise law, basically to shine light on it. But it says you have access to everything, and then it has a long list of things you can have access to, which is basically everything. Which is the federal FOIA law, which you can use if you're going into journalism or government or politics, etc. It's way more lenient. You can get access. You have an easier time of getting federal documents than you have South Dakota state documents. So just letting you know. And then we need to protect babies' life and guns. I believe that life begins at conception, and that I've been constitutional carry. And then I'm proud of our state's Christian heritage because a lot of the founders of our state were Christian, and I do believe that Christianity has ever been a bulwark against evil. Next slide, please. So like I said, I started doing Christian mission work. I still do. I'm an ordained Christian missionary. I'm very proud of that. And so I served particularly with Dakota Native American Indians, and so I had to deal with the critical race theory that really originated 50 years ago. That if you were white, you were an evil colonizer that raped Indians and killed Indians and ruined their life. What I found in all my years of research, because I lived in the capital when I was in high school, was that the history is actually the exact opposite of that. And the Native people were very, very blessed, and most of them became Christians. And that changed in the 50s. We'll see if I have time at the end to deal with that. My timer's off about halfway, looks like. Okay. All right, next slide, please. America's spiritual founding father, if you look him up, was a man called George Whitefield. And this is important because American jurisprudence was founded on a man named William Blackstone. And he basically said, whatever God rules for, we should not rule against. And George Whitefield, if you look up in the beginning of, or before the 1776 revolution, George Whitefield was preaching the law of God. And he says, he's referring to the book of Genesis, the law must be preached to self-righteous sinners. Secure sinners must hear the thunderings of Mount Sinai before we bring them to Mount Zion. He's referring to judgment and salvation. They who never preach at the law is to be feared are skillful in delivering the glad tidings of the gospel. So this is really important because the culture today and the way that we view the world is a lot different than the way that our founders viewed the world. And we can debate whether or not they were Christians or theistic rationalists, which I lean more toward the theistic rationalists. Certain of the main ones we know of, but not necessarily the people. And so he would draw tens of thousands of people, and Ben Franklin would print his sermons, and they had this understanding that one day we would have to give an account to God. There's more to this life than the next, because it's not popular to show up at a Republican meeting, right? And to talk about doing the right thing versus, I would argue that if you were to show up at a Democrat student group, it'd be filled with the bad things I was talking about. And even Thomas Jefferson, who was one of the least of the religious founding fathers, he said, I tremble when I remember that God is just and his justice cannot sleep forever. And so he has this idea of a moral duty, whether they were Christian or they were theistic rationalists, that we're going to have to answer to God, and God is judge. And as a Christian, I just want to challenge you, the Bible does give us very clear commands in the Ten Commandments, which are basically the source from which all law flows. We should not lie, we should not steal, commit adultery, including sexual sin, sex before marriage, pornography of the mind. The Bible says we lust, we commit adultery in our heart. We should not murder, but if you hate your brother, you're a murderer. God can see our thought life, and that was remedied in the great respect that they had for Christ, which was that he died for our sins, took the judgment of God upon himself, the hell that we deserved, so we could go to heaven if we would repent, that is, reconcile and turn our way from our sin and reconcile with God. And so I wanted to include that in there because whether you believe that or not, that was a prominent belief in the founding of our country. And I do believe that. I do hold that belief, and I hope that you will as well. So next slide, please. Our South Dakota Constitution says that we, the people of South Dakota, are grateful to Almighty God for our civil and religious liberties. One of the main issues on our platform, the Republican platform, is that our rights come from God, right? And this can't be taken away by other people. And that's the Bill of Rights basically delineating that. Next slide, if you will. This is Article 7. If anybody asks you if Jesus or God is in the Constitution, point to Article 7, all right? And it uses the word, let's see here, it's snuck in there. So this is done, this is right before they'll sign it. Done in the convention by the unanimous consent of the states present the 7th day of September in the year of our Lord, 1787. So an explicit Christian reference there, but next, if you will. So talking about globalism, as you finish up your, so I do believe that World War III has started. This is talking about 5th generation warfare, and a lot of the legislation that you see in those scorecards has to do with basically protecting ourselves from outside influences that are not in South Dakota. And that could be, we have the CO2 pipeline issue with basically the eminent domain and SB 201, which is going to be on the new card. But basically, we have a $4 billion in tax credits coming through our state, and they're using eminent domain. And eminent domain is for supposed to be for public utilities, public use. But it's a foreign-backed company that wants to use all this money to profit them, and they're running over South Dakota landowners. And you can look up more about that. Today, there was a couple of farmers speaking at the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers of America in Vegas, and they actually did a really good job of explaining this, so I would challenge you to look at that, if you will. Next slide, if you will. Just a picture, of course, the Christian contrast to the next picture, if you will. Does anybody know who these guys are? Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, and the Great Reset. It's interesting that book came out, 2 months after, COVID broke out. And then on our right, that would be Yuval Noah Harari, basically saying, we don't need religion, we don't need God, we'll just build an AI God, and this book is promoted by Barack Obama. So these are two very staunch globalists promoting basically social credit scores, depopulation. They're pretty explicit in that we need to reduce the world's population, etc. Next slide. And so I used that book earlier, The 5th Generation Warfare by Lieutenant General Flynn, who is Trump's NSA National Security Advisor. And he said one of the main issues in that book, if you read, is psychological warfare. What are you taking into your mind? Where are you getting your information? And so there's lots of good news outlets out there. How many of you are familiar with the Epoch Times? Or it's the top conservative, basically, journal and newspaper in the world. Real America's Voice, Steve Bannon, One America News, etc. And then you see I'm crossing out Fox News and Newsmax. When Dinesh D'Souza and Tucker Carlson started talking about rigged voting machines or even vaccines, they were basically cut from Fox News and Newsmax. So you ask yourself, why are they censoring these particular topics? You're called conspiracy theorists, extremists, etc. Next slide, if you will. So globalism, the vaccine, I've worked with the top doctors in the world. I do believe the vaccine is a bioweapon. It should be taken off the market. I'm a part of Americans for Health Freedom. Julie is as well. If you know it or not, that's with, the group up. Stolen elections, food sources. We need to protect our food because they're putting the experimental mRNA in our food, as well as pesticides, herbicides, etc. You pay attention to the media, our property rights, the sexual revolution, and then law and order. Next slide. Charlie Kirk, how many of you are familiar with Charlie Kirk? Turning Point USA. I was reading his book, The College Scam. He says that 95% of people are wasting their money on college, and that's a whole debate. If you don't open a whole can of worms, especially beyond university. But what he's saying basically is, entrepreneurship. If you need skills, access to be a professional, doctor, etc. That's one thing. Next slide. Or got about 2 minutes here. If you want a good primer, to understand what would I hand to a college student? Wish someone handed to me. I know it looks kind of cheesy, but Mike Huckabee wrote the 3 C's to make America great. And I would just go buy it on Kindle for $5. You'll be able to defend most of the talking points that you would need as a Republican. Next slide. This is me at Jonathan Edwards Church. He's considered the greatest theologian in America, also in the Great Awakening, led to the Revelation near Mark. Next slide. Next slide. I also, just because I'm short on speaking here, there's another book, The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates. Lieutenant General Flynn recommends this. And that says basically the historical context, going to the Magna Carta, the Reformation, to today's laws, etc., William Blackstone, etc., and basically resisting tyranny. Next slide. This is my favorite history book. None dare call it treason, by a pastor named John Stormer. This was Barry Goldwater was the Trump of his age in the 60s, your grandparents. And this is a book he was detailing the corruption even in the Republican and State Department as well. Next slide. If you have 3 hours, I believe this is the best documented history on the history of America, the true Christian history of America. Some of the speakers in the Doctrine of the Magistrates also in that. So I'm going to close up here, because we're about 20 minutes. And if you just go to one more slide. If you want a good book on what the Founding Fathers believed religiously, I would read that book, Religious Founders, Beliefs of America's Founders, by Greg Fraser. He's a professor at Masters University. So, try to pack as much in there as I could, give you resources, because I knew my time was going to be limited. So, I'm open to questions.
We'll listen to Julie first,
Oh,
and
okay.
we'll do a big Q&A at the end.
Okay,
If that's okay.
sounds good. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Take your water.
I guess I can talk over here. You sure can. Do you want this down? Do you want this up?
Doesn't bother me a bit, whatever you want to do is fine. Let's, if you want to go, Matthew, if you want to go to your, at the end, you have a list of,
And I can go to LRC too if you want. If you want me to run the, if you say, hey, go to this bill. Or,
you know what? I would like you to pull up SJR 506 if you wouldn't mind.
yeah.
Thank you. Okay, well, I am Julie Frye-Mueller. I am very blessed to have been able to serve District 30 for the last 8 years. I've been 4 years in the House of Representatives and 4 years in the Senate now. And the reason I went to the Senate is the former senator didn't want to serve anymore because of everything that goes on. The Senate is not a great place to be, just to be totally forthright with you guys. As you look on these cards, if you can see, there's the majority of, there's 31 Republicans and 4 Democrats, and one of the Democrats votes better than the majority of the Republicans. And I am very solid in the Republican platform, but I'm also very solid in recognizing that the Constitution, we the people, does not pick a party. So everybody's constitutional rights are protected. And so that's kind of what I go on. That's how I find my beliefs, and then of course I am a Christian, so God is also there with me all the time and helping guide me. It has been really hard to watch what the legislature has been doing to the people of our state for the last few years. We proclaim to be, we'll go and talk to you. I see people talk to you, they look at you, they tell you everything you want to hear. But what's the chance you're going to go look and see how they voted? You aren't. It's easier just to listen to us and trust that we're telling you the truth. And it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. I believe there's only 22 of us out of 105 that are actually doing the job for the people. When you look at these scores and you look at how people are voting on issues that are serious, and the choices and the decisions we are making will either negatively or positively affect you. I want to leave a positive state for you. I want to leave what's best for you, for our future generations. We have 5 grandchildren, and kind of as a, I don't know, a mama bear or tiger mom, I want to protect everyone. And that's kind of what I think some of us are known as in the legislature. We're big protectors. We want to protect you, we want to make sure things are going right. And if we see something introduced that's wrong, I'm not going to vote for it. I'm not going to do it. I look at it also as a way, I would want somebody looking out for me like I'm looking out for them and they don't even know it, if that makes sense to you. There's things people vote on. I mean, we're going, last year, I don't know if you guys would have remembered, but there was a digital currency bill, and the governor and the legislature had passed it, and then we all reached out to the governor, and we're trying to get her to veto it, and it made a big news story. And thank God we got her to veto it, so we could go back and everybody who voted for it could vote against it, and it would stop. Because without cash, you don't have freedom. You don't have freedom at all. So I know probably all of you are married to your credit cards, you know, because they're easy to do, but you gotta keep cash alive. I have a friend that works for a credit card company, and she said that little square right there tells everybody every itemized thing you're buying. And when it comes to control, food control, gasoline, travel, anything, that little thing can shut you off if you don't have cash to buy it. And I don't want you to not have freedom. I don't want a cashless society. I don't. I don't want government to control us at all, and that's another way to control us. And so basically what I'm going to talk to you about, I'm not going to tell you that much about me. I'm going to tell you about what's going on, so that you know what's going on. So the digital currency thing last year got vetoed. Guess what? Everybody was so focused on the CO2 pipelines, where we should have been, but we should be focused on everything. A baby step to digital currency went through this year. So, you know, to cashless society. So, I mean, people, we've got to be more diligent. I did not vote for the bill. I did not vote for it. But others, and then there's a lot of new people that just blindly trust the lobbyists. They said there's like 750 lobbyists that go in and out. That's ridiculous. I can have 9 people, 9 regular people, and a bill negatively affects, and this bill would fix it, and like property rights. They come and they all speak, they give you absolute detailed information. The governor sends in the Department of Revenue, by golly, Chamber of Commerce comes in against us, and South Dakota retailers come in against us, and the Farm Bureau Federation, that's another one that comes against, and killed my property tax, a property tax bill that would have taken our assessments back to 2020, because we have so many people being taxed out of their homes. Our job is to represent the people. So the other legislators in those committee seats should be working for the people, not for the department that comes in and speaks against it. Does that make sense? I mean, we're different. We've got the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. Separate branches of government, and we are supposed to stay in our lane and do what we said we would do for the people. This right here, Senate Joint Resolution, we are a gun state, are we not? We want our gun rights, we want everything. Well, the radical left is trying to redefine what the right to bear arms means. So there was an attorney in Rapid City who's been working on this with other states. He's been studying 44 states. And if you see here, over here, I'll just add it. What we added, so everything that's underlined is what was added to an existing bill. So we added to possess ammunition and accessories common to the use, because what if they say, well, ammunition isn't a gun? You know, if they're trying to redefine it, what good's a gun without ammunition and accessories? You've got silencer, scopes, gunpowder, cartridges. You've got all those things that you need to have your Second Amendment rights in some cases. Also for the purposes of hunting, because lawful hunting, because that's the way you can feed your family. It's totally common sense, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with it, and the entire Senate Judiciary voted against it. Voted against it. There's nothing wrong with what we have. I believe that we should be proactive. Once we hear what's kind of coming down at the federal government to do it, we needed to be proactive and get this into our state constitution to say no. We have the rights for that in our state constitution. It's the states that form the federal government. So, I mean, do you see anything wrong with that bill? It's absolutely fine. All it is adds ammunition, accessories, the right to hunt. and security and safety of your families. And then the second part right there is the confiscation of firearms. That's kind of touching on a little bit the red flag law. Do you know those red flag bills that are coming out where, let's say, I know Matthew and he's my neighbor and he drives me nuts and he's anti this and anti that, or your ex-husband, oh, you hate him and want to get even with him. Well, all you do is you call the police and you say they're a danger to this, a danger to that. The police come, they take your gun, they take your ammo, they take everything, and you have 30 days to prove your innocence. That's not the way it's supposed to work. So this one right here, so no law may permit the confiscation of guns, ammunition, because you have a right to defend yourself. And there's nobody should take your gun away just because somebody, an ex-wife or an ex-husband complains about you, like me. And if Mike would say something, well, Julie's got a gun and she carries it all the time and I think she's nuts, and, so then somebody would come and take mine. I mean, you guys, this is serious stuff. That's your freedom too. Let's talk about another freedom, food security. We have an NBAC facility that's like a bio-level 4. We all heard about the bio-level 4 animal and human, or the testing facility in Wuhan, China, correct? And how dangerous it was. The one we had for the United States of America was on Plum Island, which is off of New York, out in the ocean. And it was built in 1954. And that's where they did all the animal and human disease testing, the serious stuff out there, so that it wouldn't touch the mainland and come in and negatively affect where we had to kill cows, pigs, deer, everything. Well, under Obama, it got moved to Manhattan, Kansas, the heartland of the United States. And 3 surrounding states are 80% of our feedlots. So if there would be a breach in that facility, guess what? They got to kill all the animals, the barns, everything. Deer, everything's got to be killed. It does. So there's a food loss. So you guys, I'm worried about your futures because these are things that we're dealing with. This never should have been moved to Manhattan, Kansas. Never. So just to keep those things in mind. How much more time do I have, Carmen? I guess I'm here more to inform you on what's going on rather than tell you, oh, a spiel for this or a spiel for that. And being there all these years, no, I'm not a lifetime politician. I never wanted to be. I'm a public servant, and I will do the right thing at all costs. I am the only no vote in the Senate so many times in 21 and 22. I was the only no vote so many times. But now that there's one other person that I came in with, that he came into the Senate these last 2 years, so he's a no vote with me quite a bit, and then there's 2 other ones that are maybe no votes. But there's not enough of us. I mean, the more laws we pass, the more control we take, it seems like. I want to pass bills that kind of get rid of things so that we have more freedoms and things like that. But anyway, so that was one of the bills that I brought, and that, I think you would all agree it should have passed. There was nothing wrong with it. There's another one. The federal government decided, not this last session, but a week before the last session, 23, and it was the federal government said that the COVID-19 vaccine could be added to the school schedule. Well, the COVID-19 was called a vaccine to give liability, to protect all the big pharmaceutical companies, so for danger, death, or any negative effects from it. It's not. It's never went through 10 years of experiments or anything like that. They just did it. Why in the world would they want to give it to our children? Did you guys see Died Suddenly? That video that went out, Carly, did you? Or Suddenly Died, have you ever seen it?
Great movie.
Oh my gosh. It's not really a movie, it's like, what, 20 minutes?
Documentary.
A documentary. It's either Died Suddenly or Suddenly Died.
Died Suddenly.
And they have, what is it, like coroners that
Embalmers.
Embalmers, yeah, when they're doing the bodies, they pull out
Run into blood clots.
huge things, blood clots. Blood clots and all these young people dying. I mean, so why?
America's power grid is inches from collapse. Old and under stress, one event is enough to knock it down. Most people are unprepared.
Light a campfire with a bolt of lightning. The kind of power you get with the Donald Trump lighter. I should warn you though, this is not recommended for Sleepy Joe fans. This compact Trump lighter isn't just any ordinary lighter.
Thanks.
It
That's
takes
like,
in your pocket at
oh,
all
if you
times.
watch it, I mean,
Major
there'll be
difference
a young gal just standing right like by a train station waiting, all of a sudden she spins around and falls down dead, the train runs over. I mean, it is so sad what that is, and the coroners or embalmers are all saying, this is what they're seeing, pulling out, and they cover up the face of the dead body, but they show actually what they're doing to the body as it's going through, and it's really sad. So, but I had a bill that said you could not add the COVID-19 shot or any new immunizations to the school schedule. Because so many parents think that, oh, you have to have these vaccines before you go to school. You don't. You don't have to have them. If you want to have them, you can, but you don't have to have them. It's your choice. I had a cousin in Yankton, South Dakota, and she has children, and she called me, she said, Julie, the school just told me that my son has to have a vaccine, has to have all of his school shots or he can't come back to school. And she goes, nobody's ever bothered me about shots before. And I said, well, you don't have to have them. And she said, well, what do? I said, why don't you email me what you got, what you received from them? And the school sent them the statute where it says you have to have it. But they didn't send the additional 2 little inputs in there where it says, or you don't. They didn't send that. So the school in Yankton did not tell the truth. They totally misled the person. So we all have to remember to pay attention that we do have rights. If you don't want a shot, you don't have to get a shot. So many people cave to their jobs or this or that. I'm not here to talk about vaccines. I'm just straight here to talk about, you guys, people have choices and freedom. But so we've got food. We've got property rights being taken away. We've got, what was the first thing I talked about? Oh, guns. We've got vaccines. I mean, we are really hitting on some issues that are serious issues. And I'm very concerned about the way we're going. Let's see. There's another, property rights are a huge issue, and you guys really haven't had to deal with that or face that yet. You probably have, no offense. We're literally being taxed out of our homes, and I represent a community with a lot of older people, and they've maybe been, they're maybe in their mid-70s and 80s, and they've lived maybe in Custer or Hill City or Fall River County, somewhere there. For decades they've had their home. And what they're being charged in property taxes for these last 2 years is way more than they ever paid for their home. And so I have this resolution to take assessments back to 2020, so anybody who owned their home from December 31st of 2020 and prior would go back 4 years, and anybody who bought a home January 1st of 21 forward, whatever you bought your home at, it goes to that assessment, but it can't go more than 1% a year. Because my mother has my parents had 3 empty 5-acre lots in Hermosa, and there's nothing on them, no water, no electric, nothing's on them. Weeds, which we have to go spray, but they each went up 160% in assessments, each lot did. 160%, and they've owned them since 2006, never sold them, haven't done anything with them. But how is that right to do that? Because somebody else paid more for land and they weren't selling theirs. So Prop 13 from California had it, just whenever whatever you bought your house at, everybody stayed the same. And when you buy a new house, only your valuations change, not everybody's around you. But I have to let you know, actually, should I keep talking? Because property tax is really not a big thing for them. But I do have a 25-cent receipt. I have a way to try and get rid of property taxes totally, so government can't take your home away from you, or your parents, or your grandparents. So
Well, they're not going to be able to even buy a house.
well, and if this would go through, there wouldn't be, you wouldn't have to put in your mortgage. Well, I'm going to have to figure out, I'm going to have to add another, $150 or $200 a month to my mortgage payment to cover my property taxes, but it's going to be a lot more than $200 a month anymore. So for property taxes, but I just want to let you know, I know I've spoke with Carly before, and you guys all probably on social media pay attention to what they did to me last year, and what I made the news and all that stuff. Just so you know, that's how hard they tried to get rid of me, by making that up. And I'm sorry if any of you believed it. I'm not gonna go into a whole bunch. If you ever wanna ask me questions on it, you sure can. But I'm doing the right thing for the people. And I'm trying to watch out for all of the young ones too, so that you guys don't walk into a mess. But they will make up anything about anyone. My seatmate said to me, he said, they are coming for you big time, making it up, doing whatever they can to get rid of you. And he goes, when they're done with you, they're coming for me. That's how much they want to be rid of us. I'm a constitutional conservative, and I'm proud of it. I should let you know, I've always paid attention that I've had good ratings on these scorecards that are all over. This year, my husband and I were talking, I said, oh my gosh, I got 100%. From what I could figure, out of all the legislators in the state, Carly, I hate to say this when it's being recorded, but I'm going to. It seems like I'm the highest ranked one in the state as far as voting with your rights and the Republican beliefs. And CPAC, I've got a list of them here. I'll just, CPAC, which is huge, and Republicans recognize that. 24 scores aren't out yet, but I was 100% for 22 and 23. That's far back. New American Freedom Index, that's based on the Constitution, 100% on that. Citizens for Liberty is recognized by iVoterGuide, that one is, and by other national organizations, and that goes off the South Dakota and U.S. Constitution, the South Dakota National Republican Platform, and the Declaration of Independence. And they used to itemize in the back which article where they took all these bills from, very detailed, but they don't, it's so much work, they don't do that anymore. But there, South Dakota Criminal Justice is a new scorecard that they just came out this year, and I've got 100% on that. South Dakota Right to Life, 100%. Protecting South Dakota Kids, that's against marijuana, just so you know. 100% on that. And then Family Heritage Alliance, which is Family Voice now, that's on family matters, good Christian values, and I'm blessed to have 100% on that one. I had 2 A ratings with the NRA and the South Dakota Gun Owners. NAGAR has not been to the Capitol for a little while, I don't think, which is National Association of Gun Rights. But I don't know what else I should probably say. Yeah, my husband's saying, wrap it up. Anyway, well, I have 8 seconds, Mike.
8 seconds?
Anyway, I'm not trying to brag, I'm just trying to let you know I am doing the best I can to follow what I believe I'm supposed to follow, the Constitution, God's law, and our platform. And to make sure, I'm kind of a tiger mom, like I said. I want to make sure everybody is protected and everybody has freedom. That's a big thing, freedom. So thank you.
Questions?
I think they deserve a round of applause. And we'll open it up to Q&A if anybody has any questions right away.
Question for Matthew. How would a young person fare in a pool of old people in the legislature?
I think you have lots of advantages.
He's talking about Amber.
What was that?
He's talking about
You're
Amber.
talking about Amber?
No, I'm talking about you. You're young.
You?
Well,
I thought you were talking about
Heck,
Amber.
you're young.
So
Just
I think there's a
general.
lot of advantages. If you go to monforesd.com, the first pop-up that takes you to, and I don't agree with everything he says, but it's Bobby Kennedy Jr., you guys familiar with who he is? And he says, lock up your older relatives in a room and make them listen to a Joe Rogan podcast. And he said, because a lot of the older generation is stuck in MSM mode, mainstream media. And when all this stuff hit, this globalist effort, et cetera, really the people that knew it was going on were probably Gen X computer nerd users and below, because they had access to what was really going on with COVID, what was really going on with election machines, et cetera. And so one, I think there's an advantage to being able to use technology and get information. And then 2, being able to use social media, marketing, because really to get elected, What it takes is good marketing efforts, to be honest. That's what gets you elected. Now, as far as like with older people, their advantage would be, the Bible says that the honor of an older person is their gray hair. So they earned that. They earned it, and you know, they do have a lot of common sense. They do have a lot of traditional beliefs, and the old America, because there's two different Americas now. You know, there's the traditional America, and then there's the Zoom generation. So I think that they do have wisdom there, and I think if you can marry the two, that's what's going to make a good candidate.
Can I answer that question too, sir?
Sure.
Okay. The difference I feel that we have is that we actually have life experience to a point where you guys haven't experienced things yet. When I was in my, you know, early, or late teens and 20s and stuff like that, I'll just tell you, I was a professional country music singer. And no, you can't see it because I'm old enough, it's not on the internet. But that's what I did, and I was good at it. But I also knew how to do a budget and things like that. I also knew what it felt like to get a paycheck and how that money was spent. I don't think, I don't know, maybe you guys do budgets, maybe you don't. I have no clue. But there's knowledge that we bring, and we could see what we had then and what we have now. And I've learned to look like, okay, this is what they want to do now, but what could be the consequence of that in so many years? And a lot of young people do want things right away. You know, they get on their phone, they want it right away, they want to do this right away. I mean, it's instant gratification. We didn't have that when we were younger, so we learned how to have patience, and we also learned how to take the time to really study something and not just get an instant answer from something on a phone that maybe does not know the whole realm of something. So, I mean, with my opponent being 25, some of the things that bother me is, one, she hasn't lived in our district for 7 years. 2, she's never paid property taxes, so you don't feel the pain of it. 3, I don't know. She's not ready. I've seen Facebook posts and all kinds of things. I don't do Facebook posts and things like that. I don't. But when you're younger, you put things on, or even at 25, you're still currently putting things on that just don't relate to where you're going to be able to understand. And if you're going for a popularity contest, which Matthew will never win, you're smiling too much. Matthew's very smart. He does look at all these things and do it. But and you wouldn't cave, I know that, but some of them want to be part of the Good Old Boys Club. They want to be included. I want to get there. I want these people to like me. I want to fit in. I want to do this. No, you don't go there to purposely fit in. Yeah, you want to fit in and you want to get along, but you don't want to compromise your values, because then all you are is maybe I'll just say, you're doing somebody else's work, that you're doing something somebody else is telling you to do. So really, in a sense, you aren't doing right by the people, and you aren't even doing right by yourself if you can let somebody manipulate you into voting a certain way just because you're young and new and you want to fit in, if that makes sense. So that's some of my concerns. But Matthew, I know Matthew's very strong in his beliefs. Yes. I don't fit in there. There's 22 of us that don't fit in. But we fit in together, and we do the right thing, and we work together to try and help you guys.
Kind of simplified, what is the key policy for Matthew that kind of drives you to run? And Julie, what's a policy that you hope to focus on next session?
So medical freedom would be my number one issue. You see my dad back there. My dad went through a lot of medical issues for the last 20, 25 years growing up. I do think that big pharma is a Goliath and a beast that needs to be taken down. I think that they're doing great harm to people. So that's my number one issue, medicine.
I have too many number one issues, and they're all equal. So they're all number ones. Again, you know, private property rights has really even focused more, and if you watched that, the Las Vegas thing that Sheriff Mack had, I've had the opportunity to meet Sheriff Mack, and that was nice. But I don't know if Sheriff David Clark was there or not, but we've met him too, and been with him. But to me, property rights are huge, property taxes are huge in our state, but the property rights are affecting the whole Midwest. Guns, I mean, guns are a huge thing for me, but see, without, guns and food are the two things we need, absolutely. We absolutely, not that we don't need or want or deserve the other things, but I think that's what they're coming after. And when you go get a medical marijuana card, there was a bill this last year that said all these establishments that are doing it have to post it's against federal law for you to have a gun if you go and get a medical marijuana card. And so I think that's another way they're trying to come after our guns, so doing that. I tell you what, when I got in, it was $3.4 billion budget, and I've been in for 8 years. Never once voted for the budget because there's so much pork and waste in it. It's went up $4 billion. $4 billion, and we don't even have 900,000 people in our state, and that's including the 9 Indian reservations. So I guess the spending is another serious issue, because the more money we spend, the more debt we're in. And I mean, we're just not accountable to the people for it. And I don't think you guys, when you get older and you've got your jobs and you're working your butts off and you're doing all this stuff, do you really want to pay for subsidized housing for people who aren't working and taking advantage of the system? Because we have more subsidized housing in our state now than ever. So, I mean, I don't know. I'll just be quiet there. But there's too many issues to say just one, in all honesty.
I can add a little bit more to your.
Yeah.
But term limits were implemented in North Dakota in 2022, and age limits might be on the ballot this fall. Would you commit to fighting for term limits in the state legislature as well as some form of age limits?
I guess I can go first. Are you a Convention of States supporter? Are you familiar with that term?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Article 5 convention, basically if you get a certain amount of states or to agree to a convention, that part of it is proposing term limits. This issue cuts both ways. Right now, I'm actually against term limits because conservatives are harder to find. And so you're going to get rid of good conservatives. The swamp or the people with the money, they can replace their person right away. So I know that South Dakota passed, I believe, a bill, or even, was it a bill or is it in our Constitution?
When John Thune ran, it's in our Constitution.
It's in our Constitution, and I know there's a Supreme Court, my understanding is there's a Supreme Court case that shot down South Dakota's Constitution on term limits.
But then we were asked to vote on it again, the legislature, can I just?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so the people wanted term limits, so it was on the ballot and it passed that in the US Senate, you can only serve 2 6-year terms, and if you're in the House, Congress, you have 6 2-year terms. So the max you could each serve was 12 years at the federal level. And that passed overwhelmingly, and John Thune ran on that, said he'd go with that. Well, then the Supreme Court said you couldn't do that, so then they said you have to put it back on the ballot so that you can vote it back out, and we can get it out of our Constitution. Even more people voted for it. Again, so it's still in our state constitution, but they don't follow it. But I agree with Matthew, you get good ones in, you don't want them to go, and...
Yeah, I think it would be more to the detriment of the conservative side of it. And what you're up against is lots of money. And so I would define South Dakota as a corporatist state. Whoever has the most money backed by, whether it's big medicine, the hospitals, or some kind of big business, ethanol, that's who's going to get elected. They're going to put their name out there for the most part, not always. So I think you're up against a real battle there. And it's hard enough, I'm just basically repeating myself, but it's hard enough to find good candidates. And you're going to get rid of them, and they're going to recruit more. So.
Well, and the other thing is, if you don't want them in, they want to quit voting for them.
Yeah.
Too many people vote for name recognition, and in all honesty, how many people know who just signed on a couple weeks ago to another 1.2 or $3 trillion, and even some of that's going to other countries for border security. Yeah, but all 3 of ours signed on to it.
she makes a good point. So yeah, term limits should be the elections.
If you're tired of the double?
Yeah, and we need to quit voting for people that have an R, you know, and that does take time. It's helpful to have a scorecard and to have a trusted organization that can pay people or you know, some retired people that can put that all together. So, but, you know, I do think that our elections have been compromised, and I do think there's evidence of that in South Dakota. You know, if I may, basically, you know, in Rapid City, we have one address where you have thousands of people voting from just one address, a mail forwarding service. There's actually a couple of them. We have people voting from Walmart. There's people in Lawrence County voting from a similar service. So the voter rolls need to be decentralized from the national group, or they're able to inject in all counties. We have more people, to my understanding, at least I know I've looked at some of them, my understanding is all of them, we have more people registered for certain age groups than there are even people alive. So I think that there's a big issue with just the election side of it.
I have to tell you, I went to Mike Lindell's Cyber Symposium. I was invited to go there, and it was in Sioux Falls, and I thought, oh, Lord, this is going to be a lot. And we went, my husband and I, and Taffy Howard, who was in the legislature with me, and she's running again. We went into this room, and they had all the different computers and different things, and our 3 votes for Trump ended up being like, what, 7 votes at the end? The majority of them were for Biden. And it's like, how did that just happen with 3 things? We couldn't believe that it happened, and it did all right in front of us. And so that was a huge eye-opener for me as well, because if without, you know, clean elections and stuff, you guys, we're not going to be able to control any narratives.
Also another question. Julie, you had mentioned pork and waste in the state budget. Can you kind of specify what's the pork and waste in the budget that you would want to eliminate?
Okay, I will. Thank you for asking. And the first one I'm probably going to tell you is now all this socialized housing, you know, so Section 8 housing. That's socialism. It's not our job. Yes, we have to take care of some people, but it's not our job to pay for able-bodied people, you know, to go and just get it. But you guys keep working, don't you worry. The other one is, well, there's more than that. In all honesty, the colleges take a lot of money for stuff, for wants and not needs, whether it's a new pool or exercise thing or this or that. I mean, there's people who are losing their homes, and there's colleges that they think they need something new. I did not support the $100,000 mineral industries building, and my husband and my one daughter, the other daughter went for a little while, and a son-in-law, and the other son-in-law went there for a little while. But 3 of them graduated from School of Mines. And I didn't support the mineral industries build because we don't even put our own claims out there. We're not even going for lithium. We as a state who are supposedly have this building, or have this huge building, and we're training all these mining engineers.
You said 100,000, you mean, it wasn't like 6 million or something?
I think it was, to build the whole thing was over $100 million, excuse me, 100 million, holy cow, I was off, $100 million. And I didn't support it because I thought, why are we supporting building something when we're not even taking the people that we're training and educating them in this area to actually use our own resources for our own state and use that revenue as possibly funding some of the other things. Does that make sense to you? Why do we have all these engineers that can do all this stuff, and yet we're not extracting it? But the lithium they want now, they'd have to extract. The lithium, is that with the uranium or is that the nuclear? That's the nuclear. Sorry, there's so many things going on, and the nuclear thing that they want to do, you have to remember, if we go to nuclear energy, where do we put the nuclear waste? And about 6 years ago, they wanted to put the waste in South Dakota from these huge towns or huge cities that have nuclear energy. They had to have all these canisters with the nuclear waste in, and they wanted to bury them in the heartland of South Dakota. So we don't want that, so you got to look at where the waste is going to go too. Sorry.
Yeah, I have a question about House Bill 1116.
Mm-hmm.
So the bill failed, and you voted yes, and it's about prohibiting the use of state resources for lewd content on
Drag race.
universities. Yeah, could you explain a bit more about what the bill was targeting?
Yeah, and 2016, because was that prior to, that was just last year, 22?
23.
23? Okay, and the Board of Regents, I believe were the ones that were asking for the legislature to do that bill because they wanted it taken out of their hands and put into state law, so that that way they can say, according to state law, you can't do it. I did not appreciate one bit seeing tiny little children being invited to go see drag queens and asking the parents to bring $1 and $5 bills for those tiny children to be giving to drag queens. That is totally inappropriate. Children cannot go to all kinds of things. We have age limits for all kinds of things, and that was just too much. And I mean, I don't believe that there should be, it's not education at all. If you want to do something and it's the arts or whatever to you, you have all the rights to do it in a private place, but not in a publicly funded place. Even in the schools, I mean, when they're trying to bring them into kindergartners, how is that education? I mean, kids don't even know how to spell and do math and all these things, but yet we're going to spend time doing that? No. But the Board of Regents wanted that in there so that it would help them address the issue.
On college campuses?
It's college campuses, no, but this said for everything, didn't it?
Matthew, what's the top of
Yeah,
that
this
bill?
said-
Board of Regents request, right?
Matthew, what's the top of that bill? Look at,
Yeah, the Board of
introduced on the top. Can
Yeah.
you slide to the very top?
Yeah. And that was, Chris
Okay.
Carr did bring that.
Sometimes it says at the request of.
So, yeah, and that doesn't say at
That
the
wasn't
request of. A
shown.
lot of times it'll say at the request of. But like if it's at the request of the governor, at the request of the Department of Health or whatever, they'll say whose idea it was to bring it. But yeah, to my knowledge, it was the Board of Regents. And I mean that sincerely. But I would have supported it without the Board of Regents wanting it.
Yeah, I guess the only question, like, the reason why I specified about it being at the university level is whether or not drag shows were the thing you were focusing on university campuses as well, or whether there was other content that you were thinking of.
It's all public, I think it's for all, any institution under the control of a state agency or public school district may not. It says public school district.
Spend public monies.
And public, because it's public money. And that goes against a lot of people's
Fine.
values. And, you know, if you're for something, then do it on your private property, do it at somewhere else. But again, minors cannot go to bars, to strip clubs, to rated X movies. Minors are not allowed in state statute to do a lot of things, and there's a reason. And this should be added to it. Any other questions?
Well, if that's all the questions, another round of applause, I guess, for the speakers.
Thank you. We appreciate you, having us here. Even I know we're not your district, I know all that kind of stuff, but I appreciate the fact that you guys are at least young people paying attention.
Is there anybody from District 30?
Because, I don't think anybody's from District 30. No.
Just
But
by
at
chance.
least you're paying attention to what's going on. And you have to decide,
One.
do you want a cashless society? You have to decide, should I keep using my credit cards? I scold the legislators that I have, and they get their credit card out to pay $8. They said, seriously, you don't have cash? You should always have at least $50 cash on you. I do. I just am that passionate about you not losing going to a cashless society. So, anyway, Carly, did we do okay?
Yep.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you, Matthew.
Good job. You're awesome.
Oh, whatever. Yeah, you're good. And I do know some technology, by the way, although I've been told I'm old.
You have an iPhone.
I have a, yeah.
Tomorrow at 5:02 for those who want to join us.
All right, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Taking some time out to be here.